challenge from a 5Q here. I guess I'll take that. Let's say hello. Zoom in on the screen. So I've been playing third file rook. Let's see if I can play it even in this case. Sometimes the rook is useful here, and it wants to go there anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a Mino castle here. I've avoided the bishop exchange by pushing this pawn, which allows my bishop to defend this square. And yeah, it looks like we'll set up the Mino castle here. Looks like he's castling as well. Yeah, let's go ahead and do the normal thing then. The nice thing about the rook here is it's out of the way of the bishop, so the bishop is flexible as to where you can place it. So let's keep the other, in keeping with this theme, let's keep the other pieces out of the way of the bishop. Could go for a high Mino, but let's bring the silver up. Now, what to do? Push this pawn. Be pretty typical in this third file rook setup. Again, retreat the bishop and then move the rook up. Get to the plenary formation that way. So he stopped to think. Rook defends this pawn. Bishop stops the square, this pawn from coming forward. Maybe it can do something out here. It's looking at the king's head. Rook up and over, and then push this pawn, and I would be looking at that. Okay, so with the rook, with the bishop behind the silver there, he is threatening this pawn. Do I want to defend it? I guess I do. It prevents me from putting my rook on that square. But I can push this pawn and drive his silver back or forward. Yeah, I should push this pawn first and then this pawn, I guess. So that his silver will have to go backwards. Push this pawn up and push this pawn. So he maybe is preparing an edge attack. I'm not going to respond to that immediately, but I'm going to go ahead with my own plan. He did pause to think there. He was throwing out those moves blindingly fast in the opening. Probably a sign that we were both making mistakes. Could always switch to the fourth file rook too. Okay, so now I can step back with the silver here and then push this third file pawn. And he's not worried about it. Let's go ahead and do this. Get a pawn in hand, and now I can put my king on the key square here and bring the knight out. One drawback is I've got a pawn on this square already. Maybe he's going to help me. Maybe he will help me by taking there, yeah, and giving me a knight that is hitting a knight that is hitting this this silver and this pawn. So can I play this tactic now? I take the pawn. He can take with either the knight or the silver. Then I drop a pawn here. If he took with the knight, the knight will have to move, and then I can push this pawn forward and promote, hitting his rook. The silver takes, I take with the rook. Or we could do the same thing with the silver there. Silver here, I drop a pawn, silver here, push. But then he brings he just takes with the knight. Yeah, he has enough force to do it. Okay, so I should defend my knight, I guess. If there were a way to distract this silver, then maybe I could do something here. Okay, but he pushed the pawn, so I can take it. What is his idea? I'm attacking the silver. Oh no, the silver's defended by the bishop. So now I could drop a pawn here if he doesn't. So I think he has to drop a pawn. Now he doesn't have any pawns in hand. He brings the gold up to help defend. Yeah, so this is pretty well defended now. Let's see, bishop here. It's defended by the bishop as well as the gold. I was forgetting. Always forgetting the yeah, I was going to drop a pawn there, so let's just take it. He wants to bring his gold up there. Now, I go here to attack his silver. He takes the knight. So let's sacrifice here. And take here. Why is that not going here to here? Oh, that's my pawn. It's not going because it's my pawn. Okay, what do I do here then? Drop a pawn here, he can take it. Drop a pawn here. I have control over this square. Okay, I like this. I'm breaking through on the third file, maybe. So he brought his... Oops! I forgot to give out the bishop again. I thought I was just winning there. Lost a rook for nothing. I'll play on a little bit. I am hitting the knight and the rook behind it. He can just defend. I have a lot of pawns, and I have a gold. So the gold can fork the bishop and the knight. Let's go ahead and do that. Maybe get some pieces back. So the knight moves. I take the rook. If the bishop moves, I take the knight. Other moves, I can always take the bishop. Okay, so he drops a rook there. This is defended. I see. That defends the knight. So this is just a rook-bishop trade. Okay, he gives up the rook. Has he got an attack here? I don't think his attack is that promising. I can take this knight and promote. I'm good on this diagonal. I'm forking his rook and his lance. He's attacking this piece, which is defended. I've got a rook in hand. So it's a question of what's the most effective move here. Dropping a bishop to hit the rook. Dropping a rook to get something on his king. So this knight here. I'll start with dropping the rook. So I was just thinking horse here hitting his rook. Okay, he just wants to keep trading. And he wants to mate me, catch me unawares, huh? Yeah, let's think about this. So, does he have mating force here? He's got a gold, 2 golds and a silver. He does have mating force. And he was able to drop a piece near my king. So I can put a silver here. He can take this silver, or he can drop a silver here. I can drop a silver here, attacking his gold, and then if he drops something here, I can take it. Start with the silver here. Then let's drop the rook here. Hitting his gold, threatening this gold too. So yeah, it seemed like he was just winning, and then he went nuts. So I take, he takes, how about I drop a knight here? How about I defend my king by taking this and promoting? Make it difficult for him to drop something near my king. So I've got all the heavy pieces here. Okay, drop a knight here to disrupt his silver. Drop a knight here to attack this silver. Let's start with the knight drop here. Okay, he's looking at my king's head. Take that. Let's take that. And we can threaten to break through here. He doesn't have a bishop. He can take here and promote, so I have to respond. I'll take that. Ah, he has that idea. Okay. I have to run. Yeah, if he could just drop a chain of golds checking my king, but I think I run to safety next to the silver here. Okay, so knight there, gold there. So if I put a gold here just to defend and guard some squares around my king, he can still drop a gold here. I run here. Or he can take there and I will take back. What was that, a pawn? Okay. Ah, he's going to push it forward. Okay, let's take this silver. Threaten to take with check there. Okay, now I've got dragon near his king and lots of pieces to drop, so I think things are looking pretty good. I mean, what can he do that's checking me? He's got a rook in hand now. I did give him a rook. Is he going to run with the king? Gold drop here if the king comes out to here. Yeah, he did go there. So where's the race check? How about the bishop check here? King runs here. King runs here, gold drop here is mate. King goes back. Yeah, see the bishop is guarding the return square by the king. Okay, I won that. That was interesting. We will check that out in the post-mortem. See you guys then. Bye. Well, you can see by the graph there was a lot of back and forth in this game. You know, I've been in a bad habit recently of losing to players rated 9Q and winning against players rated 5Q. I mean, it's nice to win against the higher rated players, but losing against the lower rated players is a bit annoying. So my rating has been stuck in the 7Q range. It kind of jumps around because those wins and losses cause a big change in my rating each time, but they counteract each other. So I'm at this 7Q range. So it's probably pretty fair. Anyway, I'm experimenting with the third file rook. He pushed the pawn all the way, so I had to put the bishop here on 3C. I didn't really want to put the bishop there. There's a setup I'm going for that Hidechi called the plenary formation, where the bishop goes over to this square instead, and the rook comes up to this square. So that looked kind of interesting, and I was trying to get to it, but I can't quite get to it when my opponent pushes the rook pawn like this, and I have to use the bishop to defend. One thing I have learned is that I do need to close this bishop's diagonal at the first opportunity. Well, not the first opportunity, but there's a point when this diagonal is open and this pawn is all the way forward that there's a threat of an exchange there, and then leaving this square under defended, the square 2D there. So keeping that diagonal closed is important. And there are other lines in the third file rook openings where the bishop exchange happens after you move the rook here. Let's go forward a couple steps. If the diagonal were open now and Sente could pull off a bishop exchange, there's some loose pawns here. There's a loose pawn here, and well, there's a loose square here. So the bishop can place itself here after the exchange and kind of fork those two locations, this pawn and this spot here. And the point of this location being undefended is it's in your camp, and so the bishop can promote to a horse. So sometimes it's not always fatal. Sometimes it's tolerable and you can get counterplay playing some clever move, but a lot of times it's better just to avoid the bishop exchange by pushing this pawn. Anyway, let's continue with the game. So I go for a Mino castle here, and my opponent is putting his king over next to the bishop. It looks actually looks like a boat castle, except he moves his king up a little later, so I'm not quite sure what to call this castle. Maybe it's just one of the natural evolutions of the boat castle. Anyway, I put my pieces for the most part where I want them. One setup you can go for in the third file rook formation is to put the rook on this square and the bishop on this square. Well, after you push this pawn forward, and then put the bishop over here, and the rook here protects the head of the bishop, and the bishop is looking at the enemy camp here, and it's surprisingly effective, and the knight can even step up to where the bishop is now. Hidechi calls that the plenary formation, and I'm not able to get that formation in this game because my opponent pushed the rook pawn, and I was forced to, well, I placed my bishop here to defend against that push. But I do want to clear the third file here, and I take the opportunity to do that. And I take the chance to do that in a few more moves. Let's see. Here we go. Push that pawn, and then, yeah, and then I step the bishop out of the way. And then he attacked my pawn, so I defended it with the bishop. I mean, with the silver. Although I did want to keep that file open, as I said, and after a move or two, I moved the silver back. This is an interesting point where right here, because I've repositioned my bishop, Elmo is recommending just pushing this pawn forward. And the idea is that when he takes, I can place my bishop here, and it's hitting the rook. And he actually, so it's a sacrifice to the pawn, but actually he gives the pawn back, trying to keep this diagonal shut. So interesting play, and seems like that is good for me. So you can see it's kind of shifted already at this point to being slightly good for me, but I'm not finding the most accurate moves here. But I'm keeping some slight edge through this part, about even here, and then right here he makes a mistake with this pawn push, and well, the move I played was okay. If you look at the evaluation, it didn't change all that much. What is Elmo recommending? Yeah, just taking the pawn. Never mind. And then he drops a pawn, and I go back. Yeah, there's this little spike here in the graph, but actually that turns out to just be a mistake because the move I made was the move that Elmo recommended. So it's just a slight edge for me. He kind of sacrificed a pawn there and didn't really get much out of it. And I did get my bishop to a good diagonal there. The bishop is looking pretty good here. One thing my opponent has done is he's repositioned his bishop here, and I wasn't really paying attention to that. I missed that bishop at a certain point of the game, and you can remember I was even thinking of maybe just resigning, but it seemed like I had some play still. But at this point, that hasn't happened yet. I'm still in okay shape here. In fact, I'm still slightly better, and in fact, there's an interesting tactic right here if you want to think about it. You can look at this position and see what you would play. It's my turn to move, and he's just moved the gold up there. Okay, Elmo's recommending taking the gold with the rook. And of course he has to take back with the pawn. And at that point, the interesting thing is that this silver is undefended and my bishop is there looking at it. So when I push this pawn, it's kind of a double threat. The bishop will be attacking the loose silver and the pawn will be threatening to promote here, defended by the knight. It's actually pretty strong, and there's some lines where I just get two gold pieces for the rook, or I get one gold, two metal pieces for a rook, or other times I just get one metal piece, but I get a promoted pawn, and all that seems to be more than enough compensation. So that looks pretty good for me. I didn't see that idea, and I thought my knight was in trouble, so I just bailed here. And then here's a silly move. He had to take with the silver, of course. And if you don't see why, maybe you want to take a second to pause the video here and figure out the answer. Okay, the answer is after he takes with his knight, his gold is just completely undefended. So I could just take that gold. The silver doesn't defend it. The knight doesn't defend it. So we both overlooked that. That was pretty silly. So as you see, my play was not I was not at my most effective this game. That's all I can say. Anyway, I had this idea of dropping a pawn here, which is okay, but I could have just won a piece. So why am I doing that? I thought I was winning a piece here, but this is where I overlooked the fact that his bishop had been repositioned and is defending here. So when I take, I'm just giving up the rook. So I think if I count the pieces, I got a gold in exchange for the rook, because I have two golds and a silver, and the silver, yeah, 2 golds and 2 silvers. So I have an extra gold, and he has an extra rook. So that's not too bad. You can play on like that. I was considering giving up at this point because, well, it's not just losing the piece, but, overlooking such an obvious move. But I thought, well, this looked kind of interesting. What is, say I push the pawn. I mean, I have this promoted pawn. I have a lot of pieces in hand, so there's ways to turn it around, as we saw in the game. So Elmo likes this pawn push. Okay. And then he dropped the bishop back, and then I dropped the gold, forking the knight and the bishop. Yeah, that pawn push was unveiling an attack from the bishop onto the knight. That was one thing I saw that gave me some hope for this position. So I thought this was a pretty good move, but Elmo would actually keep pushing the pawn. It recommends just pushing that pawn forward, and even stronger than that knight drop there, or the gold drop. But anyway, the gold drop was okay. And especially after his move. So what should he have played? He should have played pawn to 5c, a pawn drop at 5c here, hitting my yeah, that's a way to get his bishop out of trouble. He drops a pawn here. I could take, then he could give up his bishop for a gold here. Maybe there's other ideas as well. Anyway, interesting tactic. He didn't play that. He just played the rook to 3a, which was actually a big mistake. Once again, I overlooked a move here. So yeah, you could pause the video if you don't see the move, but hopefully you saw that immediately. I could just take the rook. He dropped it where it was on a square where it was covered. So both of us were off our feed this game. Anyway, so that's a horrible move, but I took his bishop instead, and then he sacrificed his gold, which now makes sense because he had to, he sacrificed his rook because his rook was hanging anyway, so at least he got a piece for it. But after all of this, now I am just ahead, and I keep my advantage for most of the game, except for there are 1 or 2 glitches, so let's take a look at those. This is the first one here. It did not like my defensive move. That's funny. Well, I've lost some games recently where I should have played a defensive move and I didn't at a key moment. So I was a little more defensive minded in this game. So this defensive move puts the game back to about even. Apparently, there's a forced mate, a mate in 19, starting with rook takes 7h. Of course, mate in 19 is not something I'm going to be able to notice or calculate. So I'm not too unhappy with this move. It had some rationale for it, and it keeps me from getting mated. And so he took a piece, and then I dropped the other rook there, threatening to take his gold here. So he defended, and then it was a fork. I grabbed one gold or the other. So I have the lead again, and really it was just that one move, and he needed to find the best response there. And then here once again, this move, what should I play instead? Oh, it likes silver 8i. That's an interesting idea. Drop the silver here. Drop the silver there to 8i, attacking this gold, and this will help my rook break through if the gold moves. So yeah, it looks like a nice move, and it's available because he just moved his knight. But anyway, I missed that idea, and I just brought the dragon back, putting the pressure back on. And here he had a move, pawn 8e to 8d. So that's this move. If he pushes this pawn, he's got the pawn and the knight working together, attacking my king's head. Apparently this is about even. And then let's continue on. But he didn't play that, so I have a winning game here as I fight my way off. And then there's just one mistake I make here. Let's see, was it that move? It's this move. When I take back here, I should instead drop a bishop at 6i. So I need to play something active. So dropping a bishop to 6i, it would be with check. So that would be a way to keep up the attack and not give him a chance. So I played this move where I just take that gold, and I'm getting my dragon in closer to his king and preparing to mate him, as we saw. But actually he has a forced mate in this position. He has a mate in 13, starting with the move silver drop to HC. So I was trying to calculate this. Silver drop to HC. I was planning to run. But he has so many pieces in hand, I guess it's not too surprising that there should be some forced mate there. He should probably have played that. You know, it's kind of his last chance to get a mate in. Even if he didn't see the mate, he should probably have played that. Just, you know, maybe you can work it out as you as the game proceeds. And because it's with check, he doesn't immediately, you know, he can at least play moves until he runs out of checks. That's probably the best way to handle it. But he didn't play that. He moved his king, and then this is actually a mate in 3, starting with the silver drop. But it looks like the bishop drop works just as well, because now this is a mate in 2, and then there's the mate. So I don't think yeah, it doesn't give an alternative position for his king. So I think that the bishop drop forced a mate in 3 there. So anyway, interesting game, a lot of back and forth, but well, you can maybe learn from all the missed tactics there. And my resolution at this point is to try to play a game that's not so sloppy and see if I can move out of 7Q. Anyway, see you next time. Bye.